to black people see ourselves as a nation within a nation, in alliance with other peoples of color, and working in coalition with other peoples in this country to end the real reason, for us being oppressed. That's very important, that when we define ourselves as a nation, we don't define it in terms of only being black. We define it in 4 basic categories of our general geographical location here in America, our basic economic status under the colonialistic type situation in the community, our general psychological makeup, and our general idiomatic expressions and language of the ghetto and the community. As these 4 areas is the real basis by which you define a nation within a nation. See? And these are related directly to the sufferings of the people, see? Whereas just only to relate to one's skin color or one's general makeup is a very narrow-minded notion, and it perpetuates a form of racialism and chauvinism amongst the people, see? I think that people are going to have to learn how to live together on the face of this earth, and the only way they're going to do it is to establish humane revolutionary systems that make some sense.
They had been galvanized to action when guerrillas seized 3 jet planes and held them and passengers hostage on a desert airstrip. The Jordan army was forced to stand by while the guerrillas destroyed the planes. Release of captured commandos saved the hijacked victims.
All engine running. Liftoff.
When 3 Americans set off for the moon, in the first minute, their rocket was producing more energy than was being used by over 1,000 million people in the developing world. From that date, a new perspective developed of man and his place in the scheme of things.
Sorry, Mr. It's all bound, okay?
Do not fire back for the moment, unless you identify positive targets.
Hello.
Father, how many dead have you seen in the bogside?
Appearing to be dead, there are the 3 in that Saracen car. There are 2 men lying at the end of this block of flats. There's another man at least very close to being dead. There are 2 others up there. I'm told that there are some more in these flats here that I haven't seen yet. I would say there are probably about 4 dead at this moment. I don't know what those are doing, whether they're alive or dead, but they seem to be very dead, and they're thrown in as if they were dead meat.
Colonel, once the paratroopers went into the bogside, there seemed to have been a very large number of casualties.
Well, I suppose large, 5 is quite large in these circumstances. It's unfortunate. But when we got up there, past William Street here where we're standing, and up towards Rossville Flats, we came under fire. We came under fire from the bottom of the flats, from the flats. We were also petrol bombed, and some acid, in fact, was poured on us from the top of the flats.
Local people are saying that you used excessive force when you went in there.
Well, what is force? If you're being fired at, you return fire, and they know that perfectly well.
How many gunmen do you feel you've hit in the bogside?
Well, I'm told from my quick sit rep, and you must understand it's a very quick sit rep, that 3 gunmen were hit. We have not got the weapons, but this is the usual thing. We saw people come forward. I'm not going to say that I saw weapons taken away, because I don't know yet. I have not spoken to the men on the ground, although I was forward when the shooting was going on.
You have no worries about this action?
None at all.
Can you get their hands up in the head?
Yes. Come on, move.
Oh, sacred heart of Jesus, we love thee and adore.
The remains of Jackie Duddy.
The German negotiators' case is that from the start of the siege of the Israeli flats on Tuesday morning, they were faced with an impossible situation. The Arabs told them they would shoot the hostages if 200 Palestinians were not released from Israeli prisons. The Israeli ambassador, after consulting with his government, said there could be no deal, urged the Germans to take what action they thought fit, and offered the advice that it was Israeli experience to play for time in this situation. At 5 o'clock, the guerrillas had said they'd start shooting the Israelis.
Only one.
But today, the Germans explained they got through that ultimatum when the Palestinians suddenly demanded a plane to Cairo with their hostages. And here again, the negotiators faced a problem. The Egyptian government replied that they wouldn't accept the guerrillas and their hostages. And the federal minister of the Interior, when he was allowed into the bloc, was told by the hostages that they wouldn't go willingly unless their government agreed to the move and was prepared to exchange the prisoners. Again, the Israeli ambassador said, no deal. At dusk, the Germans made the decision to pretend that they were prepared to allow the guerrillas to fly with their prisoners to an Arab country. In effect, they were hastily preparing an ambush plan at the airfield where they told the guerrillas there would be a plane waiting. There at the Fürstenfeldbruck air base, they had their gun battle. The 9 hostages died, along with a policeman and 5 guerrillas. But there were too few police marksmen. 5 there to deal with 8 guerrillas, and they'd expected 4. The lack of success with the first surprise shots when only 2 Arabs were hit probably ensured the death of the hostages. After appeals to surrender, the Palestinians destroyed the helicopter where the hostages were with grenades. The German version of what happened, amidst heavy local criticism, came at a 4-hour news conference chaired by Bruno Merk, the state's Minister of the Interior. Hans-Dieter Genscher, the Federal Minister of the Interior, had taken charge of the unsuccessful diplomatic negotiations. And Dr. Manfred Schreiber, Munich's police president, drew up the airport ambush plan that failed. Dr. Schreiber maintains from the start the Israelis were condemned men. All he could do, he says, was hope the Arabs would make a mistake, and they didn't. He called the guerrillas very professional.
Today we've seen some of the most intensive Syrian shelling of the war here on the Golden Heights since the war began 5 days ago. Since first light this morning, Syrian artillery has been bombarding the town of Quneitra and the surrounding countryside where Israeli tanks and troops have dug in. The tanks have had to move position time and time again, hour after hour, changing their positions, vulnerable as they were to Syrian spotters watching them on Mount Hermon on the Syrian-Lebanese borders 8 miles away. Israeli 130mm guns above Quneitra fired back, trying to knock out Syrian emplacements. We passed a charred Syrian armored car, one of the many hundreds the Israelis claim to have destroyed over the past 5 days. As the Syrians continued their barrage intermittently, we sat with Israeli soldiers deep in trenches. Their commander told me they'd been cut off from their units stationed inside Quneitra. We took cover as the shelling started again, but the plains below the Golan Heights offer no cover.
The Israelis were unloading captured Syrian artillery shells, consolidating their positions on the northern sector, and they claimed they now had all of it except for one observation post. They also revealed how far the Syrians had penetrated until the counterattack stopped them, at one point across the main supply route, which would have cut off some Israeli units. And in the early stages of the battle, the Israelis admitted to having been outnumbered 11-1. Now, however, they have for the first time crossed over the former ceasefire line. Knocked out Syrian tanks mark the line of their advance, and the question here is whether the Israelis, even with their air power dominant on this front, will take it any further. They're settling down to a longer war against stiffer opposition than they had at first expected, and this was the warning message from their Deputy Chief of Staff.
Generally speaking, I would say that we have now reached a certain phase in the war in which it is permitted to us to say that we have been able to redress the situation. But there is still a way ahead of us, which will not be easy, in which we'll have to do a lot of fighting, in which our nerves will be probed and tested, in which there might be difficult situations, but during which I think we are permitted not to fail in our confidence as far as the Israeli people and its defense forces are concerned.
The Foreign Secretary and I have been in close touch with events ever since the conflict started, and as the Chancellor was staying with me at Chequers, naturally we kept him in the picture the whole time as well. What we agreed was that we should do our utmost to get a meeting of the Security Council, and we sent instructions to New York to this effect. But up to the moment I'm speaking, at any rate, we haven't succeeded in bringing this about. The Americans want one, and I think the Australians also. But so far the others haven't agreed.
I made my mistakes, but in all of my years of public life, I have never profited from public service. I've earned every cent. And in all of my years of public life, I have never obstructed justice. And I think, too, that I could say that in my years of public life, that I welcome this kind of examination, because people have got to know whether or not their president's a crook. Well, I'm not a crook. I've earned everything I've got. I have never been a quitter. To leave office before my term is completed is abhorrent to every instinct in my body. But as president, I must put the interests of America first. America needs a full-time president and a full-time Congress, particularly at this time with problems we face at home and abroad. To continue to fight through the months ahead for my personal vindication would almost totally absorb the time and attention of both the President and the Congress in a period when our entire focus should be on the great issues of peace abroad and prosperity without inflation at home.
There's the President waving goodbye, and you hear the applause.
I, Gerald R. Ford, do solemnly swear
that I will faithfully execute
the
office of President of the United States
and
will, to the best of my ability, preserve, protect, and defend the Constitution of the United States. So help me God. Congratulations.
People, lorries and cars, all chasing one American evacuation convoy after the other. Jams that the Vietnamese police tried to clear with their rifles, but people were no longer afraid of them. There was now so much more to be afraid of. But then suddenly we too, the 40 or 50 of us in the safety of the coaches, had to get out and fight our way to the American compound where the helicopters were landing to fly us and the thousands more out of the country. Seeing us in the streets with our bags, the Vietnamese followed. Any chance they thought was better than none. But the embassy gates were closed, and we, like the frightened Vietnamese and their families, had to fight and claw our way up. And we did claw, and we did fight. And if it wasn't for one single American Marine, whose name I didn't have the chance or time to discover, we would never have climbed our way to our evacuation. He hauled us up, kicking and punching Vietnamese who were clambering over our bodies. Ashamed and exhausted, we took our turn in the long crowd of refugees inside the embassy compound and waited for the helicopters to come down for us. One by one they came in, landing on an improvised pad in the car park. All had come from American aircraft carriers steaming 20 miles out in the South China Sea.
Marines guarded each of the 4 embassy gates as the lucky people ran 30 at a time to their transport to safety. In the first 6 hours of Tuesday, over 1,500 people were airlifted out this way, and almost as many more were still waiting their turn. Our turn came just as it began to get dark, a little after 7:30. Evacuees from the besieged city of Saigon.
I remember when I announced for president in December of 1974, there was a major headline on the editorial page of the Atlanta Constitution that said Jimmy Carter is running for what? And the what was about this big. I'm running for president.
In Guildhall, after lunch, the Queen rose to make a speech live to the Commonwealth.
At this moment of my Silver Jubilee, I want to thank all those in Britain and the Commonwealth who, through their loyalty and friendship, have given me strength and encouragement during these last 25 years. My thanks go also to the many thousands who have sent me messages of congratulations on my Silver Jubilee, that and their good wishes for the future. My Lord Mayor, when I was 21, I pledged my life to the service of our people, and I asked for God's help to make good that vow. Although that vow was made in my salad days when I was green in judgment, I do not regret nor retract one word of it.
She's just coming into Downing Street now. Here comes the Prime Ministerial rover, bearing now Mrs. Thatcher as Prime Minister. A huge crowd and a huge cheer. Plainclothes police out of a car behind her, and Mrs. Thatcher out onto the doorstep. A wave that we've now become really quite well accustomed to throughout this campaign. Mr. Dennis Thatcher, her husband, standing behind.
Mrs. Thatcher, have you anything to say?
May I just thank you very much.
How do you feel at this moment?
Very excited, very aware of the responsibilities. Her Majesty, the Queen, has asked me to form a new administration, and I have accepted. It is, of course, the greatest honor that can come to any citizen in a democracy. I know full well the responsibilities that await me as I enter the door of number 10, and I'll strive unceasingly to try to fulfill the trust and confidence that the British people have placed in me and the things in which I believe. And I would just like to remember some words of St. Francis of Assisi, which I think are really just particularly apt at the moment. Where there is discord, may we bring harmony. Where there is error, may we bring truth. Where there is doubt, may we bring faith. And where there is despair, may we bring hope. And to all the British people, howsoever they've voted, may I say this: now that the election is over, may we get together and strive to serve and strengthen the country of which we are so proud to be a part.
Prime Minister,
and finally, one last thing.
Yes.
In the words of Erin Eve, whom we had hoped to bring here with us, there is now work to be done.
Prime Minister, could I ask?